Welcome. So this week, we saw this flood of security news, right? You had hacked infrastructure, bricked Porsches, huge data breaches. It all seems kind of random, but here's the thing. It's not. All these events are actually pieces of one single, much bigger story about the invisible digital forces that are right now shaping our world. Okay, let's dive in. And it all starts, believe it or not, with a person, not a piece of code.
This is a quote from a man named Li Chuanliang. He's a former Chinese official who fled his country, thinking he'd be safe after seeking asylum in the United States. But he was wrong. Even on American soil, he says the surveillance, the pressure, it just never stopped. His story is the perfect, really human way to get into our first big theme.
You see, we're in the middle of a new kind of conflict. This one isn't fought with armies and tanks, but with data, with malware, and with constant surveillance. Nations are using technology to project their power right across borders, to silence their critics, and even to, prepare the digital battlefield for future disruptions.
And what's so fascinating here is how you can see China's dual strategy in action. On the one hand, you've got programs like Foxhunt and Skynet. These are designed to track and pressure individuals, people just like Li Chuanliang. It's a very personal, very targeted kind of digital coercion. But then, on the other hand, you have something like the Brickstorm malware. That's not aimed at people at all. It's aimed at the core systems we all rely on, the critical infrastructure of other nations.
And the scale of these operations targeting people is just staggering. We're talking more than 14,000 individuals from over 120 different countries, all forced to return to China. It just goes to show you how, with modern surveillance, physical borders can become almost meaningless. It shows how digital power can be used to pull people right across the globe. But what happens when that digital connection is just cut? Well, as we're about to see, the impact can be just as immobilizing, but in a totally different way.
So, let's switch gears to something that seems completely different but is strangely connected. In late November, Porsche owners all over Russia woke up to a really bizarre problem. Their cars just wouldn't work. And this wasn't some mechanical issue. No, the cause was a satellite link, something most of us never even think about, that had simply gone dark. Well, these cars have a super sophisticated vehicle tracking system, and that system interpreted this sudden loss of signal as a potential theft. So the security protocol, the very thing designed to protect the cars, did exactly what it was programmed to do. It shut everything down.
And just like that, hundreds of very expensive cars became nothing more than fancy paperweights. Doors locked, engines blocked, and because Porsche had pulled out of Russia way back in 2022, there was no official support to fix it. It's just a wild reminder of how fragile our connected world is, where a political decision made years ago can, through a weird cascade of technology, literally leave you stranded today.
Okay, so this brings us to our next major theme. It's not just about what countries or companies do with the technology, but about the fundamental weaknesses in the technology itself. A single flaw in one piece of code that's used by millions can create a global security crisis literally overnight. So what's this number? Well, this is how many public Docker Hub images researchers just found leaking sensitive credentials. We are talking about the digital keys to the kingdom, just sitting out there in the open, inside the software containers that developers use to build pretty much everything. And just look at the kinds of secrets that were exposed. Over 4,000 keys for AI models, credentials for cloud servers, tokens for the source code itself. I mean, these are not trivial leaks. These are the absolute core components of modern software, and they represent a massive, systemic risk for all of us.
And speaking of systemic risk, let's talk about React to Shell. The easiest way to think about it is like a master key that was accidentally left under the doormat for thousands of websites and apps all over the world. It's a flaw in a hugely popular building block of the web, and it basically lets an attacker just walk right in and take over.
But the really dangerous part about this attack isn't just getting in, it's what they do next. See, in step 2, the attacker creates a backdoor, a secret little entrance that constantly calls home for new instructions. And here's the crucial part. Even if a company patches the original flaw, as you see in step 4, it's too late. The backdoor is already there. The attacker is inside, and they are not leaving.
So all of this leads us straight to the companies that we trust with our data every single day. Because whether it's through simple negligence, total ignorance, or just bad design, corporate decisions are often creating the very risks we've been talking about.
Just take a look at the case of Coupang, which is basically South Korea's Amazon. This timeline shows a disaster unfolding in slow motion over an entire year. A contractor leaves, but his high-level access key, it's never turned off. And this isn't just a simple mistake. It shows a really common, critical failure where a company's process for offboarding people just isn't there. So for months, that key is a ticking time bomb, until it's finally used to start stealing data, a process that goes completely unnoticed for another 5 months.
And the human cost of that one failure? 33 million accounts. To put that in perspective, that's roughly 2/3 of the entire population of South Korea. This scale is just mind-boggling, and it all started with one key that someone forgot to turn off.
But, there are different flavors of corporate failure.
Here, we're comparing Coupang's accidental but massive negligence with a case involving Home Depot. In that situation, a researcher found a huge security flaw and tried to warn the company for over a year, but was just ignored again and again. It was only when the media got involved that Home Depot finally did something. So one is a mistake, the other is just willful ignorance. Both put millions of customers at risk.
And sometimes, corporate failure isn't even a data breach. Sometimes, it's a breach of trust. This quote just perfectly captures the frustration of LG TV owners who woke up one day to find Microsoft's Copilot app installed on their TVs, an app they never asked for and, get this, can't even delete. It's that feeling of losing control over the very devices you paid for and own. So, we've looked at state actors, we've looked at broken code, and we've looked at corporate failures. What's the big picture here? How do we make sense of this incredibly complex, interconnected new world we're living in? Well, here are the key lessons from this week's stories. The Coupang breach taught us that saying goodbye to an employee is just as critical as saying hello. Brickstorm showed us that modern threats can be incredibly patient, building access for years without anyone noticing. React to Shell proved that a single flaw can send shockwaves through the entire digital supply chain. And, as we saw with Home Depot, real accountability sometimes only happens when the public starts paying attention. And finally, we have to remember that all this digital activity has a very real physical cost. This explosion in AI is driving a massive demand for data centers, which use enormous amounts of power and water. This isn't some abstract tech story anymore. It's becoming a local issue that affects our utility bills and community resources, and you've got hundreds of groups now actively pushing back.
Which leaves us with this one big question. In a world where your data can be tracked by a foreign government, your server can be hijacked through a software flaw, and your car can be shut down from a satellite, who truly holds the keys? Is it you? Is it the company that made the device? Or is it some unknown actor halfway across the planet? That, right there, is the question that's going to define so much of the 21st century.